Hello, folks. Welcome to lesson 6. Excuse me. We're going to centralize, kind of like we did with the surf lesson, where Mr. Ty Kemp is going to demonstrate some background techniques and things that are involved in country music. A lot of great country players. Wow. Really stepping up, and like Glenn Campbell and Roy Clark, Chet Atkins. It's been around for a long time. They've been sharing with us. We're going to start off looking at chord progressions. It's grouping of chords together. We'll be playing in A major, noting every major scale has a relative minor scale that they share the same notes, but mysteriously they can sound different. In this case, A major will have 3 sharps in the key signature. Just keeping aware of how treble clef and sheet music can support us as players. Maybe we don't delve, but 3 sharps equals A major, F sharp minor in the relative. So, Mr. Kemp, will you give us a sample?
Okay, I'm just going to do a simple A major pentatonic type idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the A major pentatonic scale, it's basically it is the same as F sharp minor pentatonic. But one thing you can do is start on the second note, starting the F sharp minor pentatonic. So that's A. So if you do this right here, so that's technically A major pentatonic. And some of the things you can do with that is, I did this before, where you bar the first 2 strings at the 5th fret, and then your 3rd finger goes on the 4th fret. You hold all those down, and to get a real nice full pedal steel type bend, you use your right hand and these 2 fingers plus your pick. It's called hybrid picking, and it sounds like this.
That's really cool sounding. So a pedal steel or lap steel, is it the same thing? Is a flat table. Really, really great. We're lucky enough to see a performer that was a phenomenal, amazing what it does, but we can also, as guitar players, mimic, like you could even mimic a saxophone solo on your guitar when you're talking about music. And what artists would you subscribe or offer to people that they could look into that style?
One of the main ones that I think of would probably be Brad Paisley. Because you'll hear him if you listen to his music doing similar type things. I've heard him do this one where you just use the 2nd and 3rd string, and you go like this. And then you can let it go down. also do that starting at the ninth fret. It's kind of the same idea, but you're in a different section of the neck. And it's the same notes. But what you want to do there is third finger on the 12 and fourth finger on the 12 of the first two strings. And you're doing that hybrid picking technique again. So use your pick and your middle finger and play them both together and bend the second string.
All right. Are there any other artists that you would suggest folks to look into in that vein? Possibly with chromatic riffs? How does that work?
Okay, if you want to get away from the pedal steel bends, if you're not comfortable with that, or if you're not familiar with bending yet, there is a guy that I can think of who kind of really changed Western swing and country music, and his name's Jimmy Bryant. And he played a Telecaster, and he would always do more of a chromatic riff, which would be something like this.
I like that. That kind of has a bit of a spookiness to it, which is kind of fun. All the different emotions that we express musically with major happy, minor, harmonic minor, which is my favorite, or diminished, really gives a contrast. And the chromatic is just every single note in a row, which I feel gives kind of a different, feeling to it. Ultimately, it brings resolve when you go back to the root or you go back to the major, and it gives you these roads. So exploring the multiple branches, because it all starts off with that first major minor and then the branches. Blues scale is where you add the flat 5 to pentatonic. Harmonic minor is where you sharp the 7th note in the scale. So it's not as a different scale, it is just an alteration. It's important that we see the connection between them, and it's not as hard as it looks. So we're going to look at amp settings. Amplifiers for you electric guitar players, of course, here. And how is a country set up? What amp you're using? How does that complement physically what you're doing, note-wise, to the sound of what a country player would look at?
So as far as using certain EQ or setup on your amp, what you want to do for that nice, even kind of mid-rangey country sound is have your EQ all about the same, like even, So if your amp goes to 10 on each knob, you'd have bass, treble, and middle all at 5. And on top of that, if you have a spring reverb, you do a light spring reverb on the knob setting. So it's probably at about, 4.5. You don't need too much reverb, just enough to kind of give it a little depth. And for example, like I'm using a Princeton Reverb reissue by Fender. That's got a single 10-inch speaker. So using something with a 10 is always a plus, because it gives you a little extra bass and a lot of clean middle and treble.
All right. Are there certain pedals that would then enhance from a basic amp setting and your, of course, pickups you're choosing, kind of strings? We spoke about that in the surf lesson. Are there pedals that you use for when you're really getting into your country stuff?
Okay, as far as pedals, I don't usually need a reverb pedal because I have reverb on the amp. And the other two things I mainly use would be a delay pedal. So you have kind of that little light slapback effect going. And then on top of that, I use a compressor pedal, a compression pedal, and that gives it that nice kind of even um, volume, and also kind of cleans up any extra brightness. So when you have a compression pedal, it's really cool because no matter how hard your attack is or your picking hand is, it will still remain the same volume. So if you're not using one, you might hear like pops and extra noise that you don't realize you're doing. But with the compression pedal on, it all stays nice and even, same volume.
So it compresses. I know for my style of electric distortion, it is a kind of a natural compression. You really wouldn't use compression if you're playing distortion or with gain. I tried to sit in and be his rhythm guitarist. I thought it would be a good idea for fun, and the clean tone, my hand is too heavy. I was like hot, then I'm and so I found that the volume in your right hand was really important to clean, but when you use compression, it really is a support to help that happen. Um, and so I decided not to do it. But if you were so inclined to work with a clean tone, more country sound, a compression pedal would probably be something you'd need because you might hit a wall. Again, we're talking about technique and different things, tools. You hear an artist do something and you're like, wow, and there's no way you think you can do it. There's tricks and there's things that they're aiding and tools they're using. You wouldn't dig a hole with a rake, and you wouldn't clean up leaves with a hoe. Well, maybe you could, but you could try. But if you know about these little tricks that really, I think that would really help you in progressing and having a good time, So we're going to talk a little bit about chord substitutions, which I find really fascinating. When you first start out, you look at the chord you're supposed to play, but in reality, there's many, many ways to substitute. One, if a chord is too difficult for you and you avoid a song, you don't have to do that. There are substitutions that can be easier to play, and or you might find you like the way they sound better. As you're playing, it's not like I have to be like someone else. Nah, express yourself. Jeez, don't put that kind of law on yourself. Music is free and it's expressive, so we find things that work. So, Ty, would you like to give us an example of some substitutions that you like yourself?
Okay, so as you know, we've been playing the key of A major. So, Margaret, if I can have you strum an open A chord. What I'm going to do as a substitute is using your first finger to bar 4, 3, and second string, and then you take your third finger and put it on the 4th fret. So go ahead. It's known as an A6. And so that's one thing you can do with an A chord when the rhythm guitar player is playing just a standard open A. And then you can do the same thing if you go to D. So that starts same shape, movable shape, 7, and then third finger on the 9th fret. And then if you go back to A, do that again. And then to your 5 chord E. That's D. So when you're using those, it frees up your left hand to where you don't have to, think so much, right? Because if you're playing your A like this, and then you have to switch to your open D, your open E, you might have to look down more at the guitar neck and say, okay, I gotta get ready for this, this, right? But if you're using this one shape, that's the 6 chord, you can just keep your hand stationary, right? A, D, E, using that 6 chord, and it kind of frees you up. Makes it a little easier to get if you're, for example, playing on top of a rhythm guitar or acoustic guitar.
So movable shapes is something it took me years to really open up my eyes to it. And you may be barring, but the idea, like power chords, is that your hand shape doesn't change. And if you can get that shape, then you just move it around. And it's really worthwhile to work through a little bit of that technique to be able to play that shape. And a lot of jazz chords are like that, where it's easier than it looks. The chord itself may be difficult if you're barring with your pinky, 2 strings, ouch. But with muscle memory, you accomplish those things with your movable shapes. As it is, you're just moving it around. You gain so much freedom. I just want to make one example. The Beatles' "Fool on the Hill." One of the great things about the Beatles is they write in many keys. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is in 3 keys and 2 time signatures. They are so fun to study because you explore after you get your foundation so many things. And "Fool on the Hill" is well on the way, head in the clouds, da, 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 da. I don't know the words perfectly, whatever. Their use of substitution chords is so creative. I don't know if they knew it or they were just free, and their producer gave them that freedom, or they just were inspired. But there's a moment for me with the Beatles that if you really want to look at substitutions and different keys and things, the Beatles will always deliver to you surprises and wonderful things, and they sound so tasty, so I just wanted to add my 2 cents. 1, 2. So then we're looking at hybrid picking. Is a country thing. I've done a bit of it because I'm really interested in advancing my playing and giving my students more options to discover what really hits them in their heart. You find what really hits you, and that's what you want to go after you have your technique and your understanding and your knowledge. So Mr. Kemp, will you give us a sample of a little bit of hybrid picking? We might hear that phrase, like tonal center. I heard that for years. I'm like, I don't know what it is, whatever. But now that I do know, I laugh at that. But with hybrid picking, you might find that's a style like Chet Atkins that and you want to practice and you can't wait to get back to that song. It's not a labor, it's an inspiration. So will you give us a little sample of hybrid picking and maybe explain what that is and maybe some variations on that, please? Thank you.
Okay, so I mentioned this earlier in the video. One of my favorite ways to use a hybrid picking technique, right? Did this earlier. And so really all hybrid picking is utilizing your pick and pretty much these 2 fingers. And while you're using your pick, you hit these extra notes. So the pick is going on the 3rd string, and then your 3rd and 4th finger are getting the B and the E string. When you do them all at the same time, it sounds really nice, and you get that real warm sound, like a pedal steel, obviously.
So you're playing a chord, and instead of strumming it, you are picking. And it's neat is like what's so amazing about Chet Atkins, I find the man is very, very modest. Very modest. I think the best artists are. But it's, again, a different expression of what you might do strumming or that kind of how you express it when it is the same thing. That's one of the fun things about being curious about these different things. So, can you play us a little bit more,
Sure.
like a progression or something you've written possibly that uses hybrid picking?
Okay. I think of one idea. This is just an idea I've been working on for a while, but similar kind of thing. I'm barring the second fret, so I have my A, and I'm going to use the hybrid picking technique using these two fingers in my pick, and you can get these kind of like in between passing notes, like something like this. So that's one idea. Another thing I usually do when playing country music on guitar is what I like to call these six interval double stops. So it's really only your first and second finger on your left hand, and you're basically modeling an A chord, but you're only playing those two notes. So it's half of an A chord, and those two together is a six interval.
What is a double stop? Can we that's one of those terms again that I personally heard for years, and I was doing it because of Mr. Randy Rhodes. Always refer to Mr. Rhodes. Um, and then I realized I knew I was doing it, but I didn't know the name of it. So again, having the knowledge and connecting. So can you explain just a little bit what a double stop is?
Okay, basically what I was doing before is a double stop, and you'll see it more commonly like something where you're picking basically two notes out of a chord, like and double stop is just essentially playing two notes at once. So if you were in the
Not
key of
necessarily a
D,
chord though, right? It's two. And I know one that I know is I learned from um, the Cheap Trick song, the solo on that, Rick Nielsen. Oh, I Want You to Want Me. That solo, it has a great example of double stops, and it's typically a root third. So we know how a chord spell, right? 1 3 5. The root to the third interval defines whether the chord is major or minor. So it's kind of neat how you're playing a double stop, which is the root and the third, and you vary it to a major third interval
mhm.
and a minor third interval. So you get that emotion from the chord, but you don't have the five in there, but it still melodically outlines the definition of a major or minor chord. But you were going into the six originally, so how does that differ from the root third being the first and second string? And you're playing it. What were you saying you were playing?
Okay, just before I get to that six interval, I just wanted to give you an example of the other kind that we were talking about is root and third. And what you do with these double stops, they're really fun and kind of interesting because you can modulate. So like it would be the key of D major if you're on D chord. So that's like a standard double stop. Something you would do. You kind of hear it in surf music a lot. Guys do that, or even some kind of like Latin types music.
Like the Latin. I like that. I
So
didn't know that.
getting back to the six interval double stop, which one of my favorites. You can you can also modulate that up. So you would start on your fifth fret. So first finger on the 5th fret, and then your second finger on the 6th fret. And what you're doing is not using the not using your B string. You're actually using your second finger to mute that, and using your hybrid picking technique, you do something like. So you can see you start out with this shape, which is more like I guess you call it a C or an F shape, basically. And then you go into more of like an A7 shape, still skipping the second string, so you're muting that. And you can chromatically walk up like I did just a second ago, starting here. And you can do another example of a pedal steel bend once you hit that fourth interval there. You can hold these two notes together and use your hybrid picking to do another pedal steel bend. And you get that real nice full effect using just 2 strings.
Pretty neat. Again, with electric guitar, we don't use the full scale of all 6 strings. Acoustic is a projection instrument. And with electric guitar, we can, again, chop them down and still have that melody and that expression of what's going on with the chord. Also, what I just learned from another teacher friend is that sometimes the bass player will be really holding down, or the rhythm guitarist holding down the full chord or the root, and that gives that lead player to have the freedom that the root is there, but you're not necessarily playing it. And as a combined group, when you're playing with other people, you can stack things, and then like a horn section or backup vocalists are singing like barbershop quartet, right? They're creating those chords in the melody and the movement. So it's really fun to play with other people. You can have your part, and then it's fun to work with creating it with multiple pieces. Now, can you give us a song to end on? Something that you feel like, oh, I'd really like to share this. Just
Okay.
one of those things that's one of your favorites.
Okay, I got an idea. So if any of you are familiar with Buck Owens and his guitar player Don Rich, he is definitely one of the greats, kind of an innovator, and I guess you could say like a staple in the country music scene. So if I can have you play a open D chord, Margaret.
Sure.
Okay, so it starts like this. You're holding an open D chord, starting on your root, which is the 4th string. And he does kind of a unique variation on instead of just a straight D chord. So, okay, let's try it a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then go to G, Margaret. Then back to D. Then A. Okay, we almost got it. But
that's 1, 4, 5, right? If we're playing in D, E, F, G, A. When we talked about 1, 4, 5, if you change the root, you just count up. D, E, F, G, A. D major is relative minor is B minor, two sharps. I'm going to repeat myself over and over because nothing remains difficult when you get used to it. So just get used to stuff and enjoy your progress.
Okay, let's give a little buckaroo one more time,
Okay.
just so you can hear it.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, folks, take care. I hope you enjoyed this. And just keep going. Keep believing in yourself. That's what you're here to do. You're here to grow and learn and love and be loved. That's really the most important thing in life, I believe. And get a cat or a dog. Thanks, folks. Oh.